Hi there, DIY the Green Guy here, and I'm blowing the myth away that being green costs a lot of money. Stay with me for some tips, ideas, and we'll even have some fun too. I'll show you how to be green and stay green all at the same time. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you on the show. Thanks for joining me. Hi there, DIY the Green Guy here. And before we get into anything, please subscribe and like the channel, and I'll keep giving you tips and ideas on being green without breaking the bank. Hey, we have a request here. Someone actually wants to know if it's possible to light a campfire totally naturally without petroleum distillates, fire starters, or what have you, just using the natural stuff you find in the forest or in the woods or on the ground or what have you. And this is actually one of those survival things where if you're stranded out in the woods and you need to make a fire, you want to be able to make a fire and use what you have around you to actually start it up and possibly either keep warm with or cook on, or maybe even have the smoke billowing up so that you can have people find you. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually light a fire here using nothing but what we find around a campsite or out in the woodlands or what have you. And this is going to be really interesting because you should be able to do this even when it's wet and it's raining. And it has been raining here for the last 2 or 3 days. So everything I have is relatively, well, damp. How can we say it that way? So this will be interesting. It'll be hey, something for me to be able to do, and I'll show you how to do it. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a close-up on the campfire so you can see exactly what I'm doing and exactly what I'm using. And by all means, if anyone out there has ideas on green things that they want me to do and take care of and film, send them in. I'll be more than happy to do it. So let's change positions. Let's get into close-up, and you'll see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, what we're going to do here is I'm actually going to build a fire from scratch, and we're out in the suburban woodlands. So if you hear any city noises in the background, it's because we're actually kind of in the city. But whenever I go, regardless of that, I always take my Ozark Trail tent, which I have set up in the background, because that's my buddy when I go, and I've been using it for years. We'll get more into that later. Right now, let's do the campfire. Now, there are 3 parts of every campfire. There's the tinder, there's the kindling, and then there's the fuel wood. Now, we're not going to worry about the fuel wood because once you get a fire going, you can just use big logs or what have you for the fuel. What we want to do is talk about both the tinder and the kindling. And those are the 2 most important parts because that's what starts the fire, and that's what allows you to add on bigger and larger pieces of wood. So I have gotten a box here, as you can see, of all types of different tinder. And you can even use a feather. We're not going to burn this because this is my feather. But you can use a feather. You can rip off these pieces of the feather and actually use them to help start the fire. But here we have pine needles, which I love, and we have old leaves. Pine needles will burn under any circumstance. And you can just pile this stuff up, and I just have a whole box here. And the more tinder you have, basically, the better the fire is going to start. And I have all sorts of things here that should start up pretty good. Just different pieces of what have you that I found on the forest floor. And the next thing, okay, now that we have the tinder here, the next thing we want to do is start putting on some of the kindling. Now the kindling, you want very, very, very initially tiny pieces of wood that will readily catch fire. And remember, we're keeping this in a cone shape so that it burns upwards. And you want very small pieces and very dry pieces if possible. Although realistically, even the wettest pieces of wood will burn once they start on fire. once they dry out from the fire beneath them. So all I'm doing here now is stoking it with incredibly dry little pieces of kindling. And you can see the pile here that we have, large and smaller, and the smaller pieces you want to go first so that they burn, and then larger pieces like this, and you can hear me cracking them. That's how dry they are, because that's what you want. You want dry, dry, dry wood, as dry as possible. And we'll just keep stacking this up, and once I get it fully stacked, we'll come back and I'll show you what this looks like. What I always like to carry is one of these plastic little butane lighters, and actually take a couple of them. You know, of course, if you're a traditionalist, you're going to use matches. But the whole idea is that these are waterproof. You can drop them in water, you can get them wet, you can leave them out in the rain, and they're still going to light. And they're, you know, they don't weigh anything. They easily fit in a pocket or a backpack. So this is what I want to use. In fact, I always use this. If you want to, like I said, be a traditionalist and take matches, that's fine. Just make sure you keep them covered or wrap them in plastic to keep them from getting damp. But hey, this is the ticket right here. As you can see, we have it all piled up here, and I'm going to try and light this thing up. Hey, no petroleum distillates, no fire starters, no nothing, and we'll give it a shot here. Hey. Keep feeding the fire. You want it to burn? Keep feeding the fire with little pieces of tinder. And where there's smoke, there's fire. You might have to blow on it. We have smoke. Still have fire. More tinder. And there you go. That fire is not going to go out. And in fact, as it's burning, as you can see, when it slightly does go out, it now has such a good coal base that all it does is take a little bit of blowing on it, and it will continue to burn. And once you get the tinder on there, and the tinder starts burning, you can graduate up to as we have. Now it will slowly burn across here and ignite the entire pile. And make sure you keep feeding it, because you want to do that. Use nothing, natural stuff. You can see I didn't put anything in there except a lighter, some of my breath, and we have a fire. So we can just keep adding on and keep going, and I guarantee you that this is big enough now that it's not going to go out. And it will slowly grow, of course. What we'll do is, we have the makings of a fire here, as you can obviously tell, and it's burning good. So we'll cut the camera, and we'll go to how it looks like in about 15 or 20 minutes or so. So stay tuned, and we'll be back. Hey, we got the fire going, and as you can see, it was done all naturally. We didn't use any type of fire starter, no petroleum distillates, nothing. just pine needles, some other kindling, small pieces of wood, and you can see how beautiful it is. Hey, it's good for cooking, just for gazing, for keeping warm, and it's a great touch in the campground when you're sitting around by your tent. And speaking of tents, that's my buddy, the Ozark Trail tent. I've had this thing for a couple of decades, and yeah, it's a little worse for wear, but I'll tell you what, the shade fly here still repels water like good as new. It still goes up like a snap. All the zippers work. I sleep in it and take it with me every time I go camping. It really is a beautiful tent. It's worked well. It's held up, and I don't plan on getting rid of it anytime soon, let me tell you. And I just want to say, make sure you stay with me right here. I'm blowing them the way that being green costs a lot of money, proving it once again by starting a fire using nothing but what I found on the ground. And we'll see you here next time, me and my buddy, Ozark Trail. Thanks for joining me.